Well, folks, it is that time once again. We got another conspiracy at our hands, so definitely hide your kids, hide your wives, because the Martians are here. Lock yourselves in the basement, like and share, and roll this. Roll
Dr. Putoff, he does zero-point energy research. He's worked for every three-letter agency. Told me personally that he knew we already had these technologies, but that if he were to bring them forward, he would be killed along with his family and children.
And he's talking about like the free energy, right? Something that they're hiding from the public, from everybody, because the fossil fuels, they're eventually gonna run out and they pollute the planet, but the free energy does not pollute the planet. That's it's being talked about. Dr. Stephen Greer.
1927, there were 2 billion people in the world. Now there's 7.
Now there are actually 8, but by the time you watch this, maybe we're gonna be 15 or back down to 2. Oh shit! Or maybe even less. It just depends how we go from here, man.
So of those 2 billion people, there were very few people living with cars and electricity in their homes and et cetera and so on. Now you have 7 billion people and billions more people living on that system, which has become entrenched, bureaucratically built into our funding mechanisms from the state, local, federal level of support, and also where there are a lot of very powerful stakeholders. And so from a rational point of view, you'd say, well, these technologies would get us off of oil, gas, nuclear power, no more Fukushimas. But from the point of view of people who are looking at the national security equation from a macroeconomic stability point of view, this is their worst nightmare.
They need to, basically money is the answer. Money is the reason why they don't want to transition over to clean energy, because they're probably not gonna be able to profit off of that the way they do from oil, gas, nuclear energy and all that, right?
9.9% of the people on planet Earth would benefit from this. There is a very, it's not the 1%, it's the 0.0000001% who would not benefit.
The 1% of 1% essentially that basically steals from you and all of us, right? They are the ones that are not going to benefit from this.
Because they are the ones sitting atop the petrodollar system, the macroeconomic order, and particularly the fact that it is run, and everything we're using is run on a metered linear energy source, even solar and wind. If you begin to talk about the phenomena of new energy, free energy, anti-gravity, UFOs, you're stepping into an area that is the most sensitive, compartmented intelligence in the history of the United States. First, I want to give you sort of the big picture. And the big picture is that we haven't needed fossil fuels since about 100 years ago. This building was built in 1913. Certainly by then, Tesla, Faraday, Maxwell.
Do you believe in that claim? Because obviously these are very incredible claims, and incredible claims require incredible evidence and backing up. Now, Dr. Stephen Greer, I do believe the guy, he's very credible and he seems genuine as well. And I do believe that we do have clean energy, or energy that's way better than all of this. But I don't know, man. I don't know, like, if we had that all the way back in the 1900s. Here's the thing, right? Back in the 1800s and 1900s, like, the technology that we had at that time was nothing in comparison to what we got now. Like, you're telling me from, let's just say, the zero, right? Obviously, we have been around for thousands and thousands of years. You're telling me that from the 1900s to the 2000, we blew up like this in terms of technology? Something must have happened in between that gave us an inch, and then we took a mile, you know what I mean? And from 2000 to now, 2024, huge difference, massive difference, bro. We keep phones, we keep computers in our as phones in our pockets, right? So huge technological revolution that we got, and the industry is not just 2x, it's like 100xing, 1000xing in terms of technology that we had back in 1900s and now, you know.
Particularly the Maxwell-Quaternion equations that were chopped off and changed, as you may well know, some of you who are engineers. Has resulted in us having an energy sector that requires us to burn something or heat something up to create steam to get us electricity or to run our cars. However, 100 years of really advanced physics, which weren't that well understood 100 years ago in terms of very high voltage systems at certain resonant high hertz, they call it, cycles per second, would result in this excess power And it was observed by Faraday, and it was observed by Tesla, and it was observed by many others, and said, where is this coming from? Professor Dirac, D-I-R-A-C, said, well, he called it the Dirac Sea. And of course, Tesla called it the ocean of infinite energy. And it's been called various things. The modern term is the zero-point energy field. If you create this kind of vector into the zero-point energy field, and you create a certain counter-rotating vortex.
But I wonder, right, like, what's going to happen when the petrol runs out? Like, I read somewhere that it's eventually going to run out soon, right? Like, 2050, somewhere around that time. Maybe a little bit later. I would have to Google, but eventually it's going to run out, right? So once it runs out, is it then they're going to introduce this energy, or is it just that they're not gonna and just watch the chaos? Obviously, they're saying they're gonna move over to electric vehicles, right? That's the solution, but I don't know.
Let's keep watching. A Sufi-like phenomenon. You get what's called lift, and you get a phenomenon that's known as electromagnetic gravitics. Now, the pop culture would call it anti-gravity, which is really not correct. What you're really doing when you see a UFO moving and it's going straight up 10,000 miles per hour against gravity is that it's actually in a space-time bubble. It's creating its own environment, shall we say. So there's no restrictions to normal aerodynamic formula. And so the thing can lift and go straight up at those velocities. And if it goes through another level, the entire object, the mass of the entire object, can become massless. And
this claim kind of gives me, it sparks that idea, right? Because recently we heard about the Jellyfish UFO, and they were talking about the fact that it goes underwater, and the water around it was not disrupted. Oh, shit! Meaning that usually, like, even if you throw a stone on water, yeah, you know, you're gonna see the water kind of just splash, right? Because that's normal. You're throwing something, it hits, and then you have the detection and you have the splash. But what they were saying was that it goes underwater and it's like no disruption whatsoever. It comes out of the water, no disruption. The water is staying still. It enters, it moves underwater, no disruption, and it comes out just 45-degree angle and just shoots off, right? And what he said, that 10,000 miles per hour creates its own like bubble, loophole, or space hole, whatever, like he said, kind of gives me the idea, like, what if, right? Like, that's an insane thought right there.
When you enter into what's called the transdimensional physics, when something moves from one dimension to another, or transverses one dimension to another. By definition, all interstellar vehicles are transdimensional. Let me repeat that. If it's interstellar, it is transdimensional. It is not getting here at a subluminal or below the speed of light velocity. This is the key thing that people have to understand and began to be studied. Now, in the early days, let's go back to the time of Tesla, they were observing with usually DC power systems, direct current, as opposed to alternating current, which we use in our homes, which Nikola Tesla invented or came up with. That would have this effect where a certain amount of energy would go into a system, more would come out. It wasn't really accepted until Dr. Casimir, a physicist named Casimir, and the Casimir effect, where this was published in mainstream physics journals, by the way, proved that there was this zero-point energy field, that there was this energy that was left even after you cooled down all the atoms and all the activity in the universe down to absolute zero, which is a specific temperature. And there's still this energy there. And that zero-point energy field, as it turns out, is embedded everywhere in space, not outer space, here in this room. So that every cubic centimeter of space in this room, for example, has enough power to run at least the United States for a day, a cubic centimeter. So it's an enormous field of energy. So running our planet on this energy field would be like taking a thimble out of the Great Lakes or something of water. It's a trivia, it's a rounding error. However, as J.P. Morgan famously was reported to have said to Nikola Tesla when he had a car that had a little antenna on it that was running around where the batteries were charging themselves. J.P. Morgan said, if we can't put a meter on it, we don't want it.
Damn.
Big bankers. Now,
yeah, that's the money. I mean, money talks, right? Bull squash walks. That's what they say. And back in the, it's so crazy, right? Because back in the days, like, they really did believe that we're gonna have flying cars and everybody's gonna be rolling in flying cars. Indeed, we have a flying car. Oh shit! You can watch it on YouTube. We do have flying cars, but it works more like a plane. I mean, understandably got wings and everything like that. But the thing is that it's so crazy to me that back then we thought that we're gonna have flying cars. We kind of do, but back then the idea was that everybody's gonna be on their flying cars, but that's not true, right? So in a way, we're still kind of behind, but I also do think that it's not about like us being behind. I do believe that like no matter how much more advanced we get, we're not necessarily gonna see like flying cars, because think about it for a second, right? Like, don't accidents happen already? Bruh. On highways and crap? Do we want like more like accidents in the sky? Probably not, right? Especially with planes flying and then you throw in like cars in between. Yeah, right? Like it's gonna cause like a lot more chaos in the sky. They're probably not gonna they can apparently, like, we also heard that there will be self-driving cars. We already got it, but self-driving like vehicles that will just fly in the sky to deliver you food and all that type of stuff. I've been actually reading up on that, so we might get something like this where if you want to fly like cars, you would have to get your license in that, and that's gonna be different, maybe. But I just don't believe in that we're gonna get to that part, because that's gonna cause like a lot of chaos, to be honest.
100 years ago or 90 years ago to today, nothing's really changed in terms of the geopolitical, financial, macroeconomic exigencies. That's the huge problem. Is there a technical challenge? Yes, and we'll get into how we can mount a sort of effort together to come up with a modern day version of what Tesla had. But the geopolitical, macroeconomic policy issue is the big problem. And it isn't just because there are a few bankers and kleptocrats that are misanthropic sociopaths, although some of them are. It's because there are a lot of stakeholders who don't want to have to deal with the change. Even if you don't accept that in your paradigm, the inhumanity of keeping these sciences and technologies away from the public and the poverty that it engenders. Because I was talking to an industrialist from India, and he was telling me it would take trillions of dollars to properly electrify the subcontinent, so that people have the energy they need.
You know what? This is absolutely wild. I heard this as well. You know, if in Sahara Desert, and it doesn't need to be the entire Sahara Desert, it needs to be like a smaller portion of. And when I say smaller portion, it's still like very, very big. It's gonna require actual manpower, and it's gonna take years for this to happen. But they're not doing it, is what I'm saying. Basically, if they were to put solar panels in Sahara Desert, they can literally power the entire planet with the amount of energy it's gonna generate. It's crazy, and energy is gonna like, forget about like everything else that produces energy. Some solar, when I say some, it's still gonna be like large amount, like it's still gonna be kilometers wide, multiple. It's still gonna be big, okay? It's like you cannot just put like 2-3 solar panels and you can power the planet. No, it doesn't work like that. But still, Sahara Desert is like completely in like the middle. You get a lot of energy there, solar energy, and if they were to put solar panels there and they really move on with this project, they can power the entire planet, bro.
Using today's conventional systems, even solar, even wind, even coal. And you know, we're facing a situation now that every year or two there's 1,000 new coal-fired burning power plants being put online in India, China, and elsewhere, mostly without any scrubbers. So in the Pacific Northwest and other places, you have a huge amount of the pollution that's in the West Coast is coming from Asia, because there's no scrubbers in those.
Yeah, obviously.
Like, you look at the air in Beijing and Shanghai and other cities, it's not breathable.
Yeah. It is insane. And I went to Lahore, like that's my hometown, right? Like, love the city. It's a city I grew up in. But the one thing that I despise is the air is really polluted. There was a study that came out recently that if you spend 1 year in Lahore, that's gonna significantly lower your lifespan. And the study was done, I believe, by New York Times. And they say, like, if you spend 1 year in the city, your life expectancy can go down as much as 7 years. So then you counter in like Delhi, that's in India. You counter some of the high production cities like Shanghai as well, China as well. The air is really polluted, man. it's like, holy shit, you know what I mean? If you live there, you are literally, your immune system is constantly battling. Your immune system, if you live there, your immune system is way better than people that here in the West, right? Because if you think the air is not that good here in the West, I mean, bro, like, you have not seen how it is or how it's like on the East, especially like India, China.
Then you go to the oceans, where you have the Fukushima reactor releasing all this radioactive material, and huge parts of the oceans, because there's all the CO2 going into the oceans, are beginning to die because of the acidity and alkaline levels being upset. So there are all these big macro geophysical effects.
Yeah, we're polluting our waters as well, man. The oceans, yeah, goddamn, man.
While we're trying to maintain the current macroeconomic order. Big problem, huge mistake.
Yeah.
But who's going to fix it?
How can it be fixed?
This is really the crux of the problem. Now, many people have asked me, given the folks I've met with over the years, why doesn't someone do that?
Yeah, it's always someone, huh?
But see, everyone says that.
Everyone says that.
My wife and I this week were just up in New York meeting with the head of a foundation. And the question came up frequently with people there, all of whom were incredibly wealthy. Well, why doesn't Bill Gates do it? Or why doesn't the president? It's always, why doesn't someone else? Of course, if you go to the president, he'll say, no way, Jose. And if you go to billionaire X and billionaire Y and billionaire Z, many of whom I've met with, they'll go, you know, one of them once said to me, we all want to be first to be second. Great expression. You hear it a lot in business when it's a very controversial science. No one wants to be the first to stick their neck out. So this becomes then a leadership issue, which is what I've tried to provide some clarity to.
Yeah, basically all of the humans, myself included, like, we are just lazy. We just if we're comfortable in one spot, we want to stay there, and we fear the unknown. That's essentially where it's at, and nobody want to be the first. But once somebody does it, then you want to chase it, and then you want to beat him. You know what I mean? It's like if somebody wins the race, for example, Usain Bolt, right? Like, he's the fastest runner. I'm not sure if somebody actually beat him or not, but if not, if he was already beaten, whatever, right? The point is that, let's just say for a second, right? Like, Usain Bolt became the fastest runner, he beat somebody up, and then someone else would see it and will be like, okay, now I need to beat him. You know what I mean? He's the first to do it, now I'm gonna be the second first to do it. Like, yeah, that's how it is, man. That's how the mafia works, boys. But check out this video on the screen. Check out this conspiracy as well, man. It's gonna blow your mind. And I will see you right there. Don't sleep on this one, man.